Today I present to you the Cold Steel Leatherneck SF, one of my favorite knives, and I'm not just saying that. Let's start with the sheath. When you unbutton it, first of all, when it's buttoned, I mean, it's just not going to come undone. There's no way. It's very secure and fastened. When you unbutton it, it has a click to it, so it's not coming undone, and you can see the Secure X sheath does its job. It holds it in there even with it unbuttoned. So to take it out, you could either just pull it out, or you can just use your thumb and unsnap it, and out comes the knife. So this is the size of the knife. It is actually 6 and a little over 3/4. It's essentially, here I'll show you right now, it is essentially 7 inches. Basically, it's essentially the same size as the K-bar, which I've had in the past, by the way, but I got rid of the K-bar. Why did I get rid of the K-bar? Because it bent after I threw it at a tree about 4 or 5 times, literally, and it bent because they have a smaller tang. This has a thicker tang, I'm going to talk about that. But as you can see, it's just barely under 7. So that is the length of the knife. You can see the size. The handle is very nice. If you press on it, it leaves a very temporary indent from, so it'll absorb some shock. It is not complete hard plastic. It feels very comfortable. And if you kind of come back on this knife, it really chops. I mean, it really chops. I've chopped through so much with this knife. And it is German D2 steel. I'd like to take a second to talk about the differences in the steel, because a lot of people say the Buck 119 has a very acceptable steel, the 420 HC steel, but it's actually a little softer than the German D2 steel, and there's some differences. One thing to note is that there is a difference between D2 and German D2, and a lot of people don't realize that, and there's also a difference between the heat treats. So just because somebody had a bad experience with D2 doesn't mean they're all bad. This knife has been through a lot, like I said, and still no chips. No even tiny microchips. It's just great heat treat, great German D2 steel, and it's actually harder, which means that this edge is going to last longer than on a softer steel. Now they say it's harder to sharpen. I personally not have problems with that. I think that's just a user thing. You just keep practicing sharpening knives. I don't think it should be a huge problem. I mean, I'm not an expert knife sharpener. I'm able to sharpen this thing. It's a knife after all. So the steel on this is great. I have no complaints. I think it's a great, tough, hard steel, and this is a great steel also. But you can see the wear on this knife. The Cold Steel Leatherneck SF, very great. Okay, so why does this have an edge above the K-bar? Why does this one not bend when the K-bar does? That is because of the tang here on the end. You can see this is like where you would pummel things, kind of like if you got to hit a nail back into a 2x4 or whatever, if you had to, you know, whatever you might imagine using that for. But the tang is very thick, and like I said, I don't even have the K-bar anymore, but it is about twice as thin. So you'll see online, K-bars can crack here, or they can just bend here, or they can just crack in half. I mean, I've heard stories of Marines taking the K-bar and literally just stabbing it, and the thing can crack in half. So this is a huge improvement over that, and the price point is better too. This one, if you look on Amazon, I think it's about $60 right now, where the K-bar is normally about $90. In stores, this one's, it depends where. I mean, this one's like $100, where the K-bar is like $130, depending on the stores. So that's the better price, the better product. That's the Cold Steel Leatherneck SF, one of my favorite knives, one of the best knives in my collection, one of the most beautiful knives. The only knife really of this kind of size and caliber that I think is more beautiful is the Leatherneck Tonto, but it's not, to me, it doesn't have as much purpose, so I think this one is more practical. It's just, wow, this is a really beautiful knife. I mean, there's no doubt about that. They're about the same length, and so that's the story, guys. That is the in-depth review of the Leatherneck SF.